I'm going to start by drawing some leaves for the wreath that we're going to make today. So just using printer paper and a pencil. I'm using an automatic pencil. Use any drawing device that you like, and just sketch out a stem and with a leaf at the end. You can use your reference photo if you want, or just make it up as you go along from memory or your imagination. Just make some leaves along the stem, making sure that the leaf overlaps the stem quite a bit, so that when it's cut it's quite firmly attached. So I'm adding another stem coming out of the main stem, and I'm just adding an oval shaped leaf at the end here, because I want it to look a bit like mistletoe. This is sort of like a mistletoe wreath that I'm making, but you can make your leaves any shape or size or form that you like. So one more stem coming off at this angle on the other side, and a oval shaped leaf with a bit of a pointed top, and some more connected to the stem. Everything should be very well connected, as I said. Otherwise, when you cut it, it will be very fragile. So that's my mistletoe, sort of sprig of mistletoe, I guess, sketched out. Just rough. It doesn't need to be pretty or perfect at this stage, because we're going to fill it in with pen, block it in with pen. So I'm going to start my berries now, just making another stem, a curved stem. Drawing some circles on the end as the berries, and making a few side shoots, some stems coming off of the main one, and some circular. They shouldn't be perfectly circular, just sort of, doesn't matter if it's slightly oval or imperfect, because naturally berries will be all different sizes, shapes. They won't be perfectly round. So that's the berries sketched out. And now I'm going to find a pen to go over the edges, go over the pencil marks to make them permanent. So if you want to correct anything, if you want to change anything at this stage, you can. If you want to change the angle of the stem a bit, or the size of the berries, you can do that at this stage. You can use a thin pen at this stage as well. If it's too thick, it might create a line in a place that you didn't want it to go. So don't use too thick a pen. As the twigs are quite delicate. See, it's not perfect at this stage, and that's okay. Just getting a thicker pen to colour it in with. I think I use a brush pen, a Pitt. It's a Pitt Artist brush pen, which I haven't used that much in the past. I did find that the nib became a little bit squashed, so it didn't give such an accurate line, so I haven't used it that much. I'll put it on fast forward now. So I'm just using a Posca pen now, which is a thicker pen. My one is thicker. They do come in all different sizes. And this is an acrylic paint marker. And I'm just using it to fill in the berries where there may have been a few sort of white spots, or it wasn't as black as I wanted it to be. So just thought I'd use a thicker pen with a thicker ink to go over where I used my Pitt pen. That's all done now. So now I'm going to start on the leaves, and I'm going to use the Pitt pen to go over the lines rather than my Micron pen, because the leaves aren't as delicate as the berries, so I can use a thicker pen. I'll put it on fast forward now. So now I'm using a rubber to remove all of the remaining pencil marks from the sketch, because I want to scan this in and then trace it in the Silhouette cutting software. And if I don't remove those pencil marks, the software, this tracing software, will pick them up, will sort of see them and try to make a cutting line there rather than around the leaf itself. So I'm using my iPad, it's an iPad mini, to take pictures of my berries and leaves, because I wanted to try it this way rather than using a scanner. So if you don't have a scanner, you can just use your mobile phone or your tablet device and take a picture of your sketch, your drawing, and we can use that to trace from instead of a scan. It's a lot quicker and it's as good as a scan. Just make sure your lighting's okay and there aren't too many shadows going over the picture. So I've opened my photos in a photo software called Affinity, which is very similar to Photoshop, but it's a lot cheaper. It's only around £30 or £40 and it does pretty much the same thing. I'm now using the levels effect to adjust the light and dark areas of my photograph, so the whites are completely white and the black bits are completely black. And that will help when you try to trace a cut line. I've imported the berries sketch into Affinity Photo and I'm using the levels adjustment to make the blacks very black and the whites very white once again. So I'm now going to import my adjusted JPEGs into the Silhouette Studio software. I'm using the Designer Edition. So I'm drawing a rectangle around my sketch and I'm switching off the high pass filter. I'm going to switch on the low pass filter because that gives a smoother cut, I find anyway. And I'm just taking the threshold down in order to get a sort of more intricate cut. trace, and now I have the trace of my berries. I can adjust them if I want to, but I think I might leave them as they are. And now I'm importing my leaves. I'm tracing them, selecting trace area by dragging a rectangle around the image, clicking off the high pass filter, clicking on the low pass filter and adjusting it, and then taking the threshold down slightly so I get a cleaner, more intricate cut template. And then clicking trace, removing the picture, and now I have my traced image with cut lines. See, they're quite similar. They do need a little bit of tidying up though, so I'm going to adjust some of the edit points within the trace, and I'll start by taking out the black filler colour so I can see it more clearly. So I've just double clicked on the cut line and it's brought up the points that I want to adjust. So I'm just adjusting the leaves a bit so they go in a bit. That's done. So I'll add the filler again. And I'll save it to my library, my Silhouette Studio library. So now I'm going to make the backing for the wreath by making a circle, by choosing ellipse, making sure my mat size is 12 by 12. You're choosing the ellipse function on the left hand side, drawing a circle by holding the shift key and dragging so that the outer circle fills almost the whole of the 12 by 12 sheet. And then I'm going to use the offset feature here and make an internal offset, a rounded edge one obviously, and I'll just move it inwards so I'm left with a ring, which will be the backing for the wreath. So I'm going to group them and make a compound path, so that it isn't just one circle on top of the other, it's actually a ring with a hole in the middle, which you'll see when I add some filling material to it now. And that's the backing material made. I'll probably cut about 3 of these in a sort of medium weight cardstock. One sheet probably be a bit too flimsy, so I think 2 or 3 glued together should be fine. Now I'll bring all of my elements together into the same workspace so I can resize them and make sure the leaves and the berries are the correct size to go on the ring, because we know the ring fits into a 12 by 12 sheet, so all the other elements have to be scaled correctly. And that looks about right to me. I'll sort of test it by duplicating the leaves and moving them around the ring to see how they'll look once they've been cut out of paper and glued onto the ring. And I think I'm quite happy with the sizes. So now I'm going to make the hanging tab by using a rectangle this is how we will hang the wreath to the wall. So make a rectangle and a circle, and then we're going to use the modify function in Silhouette, the Silhouette Studio software, which will weld the circle and the rectangle together. I'm just getting the shapes right now, because the rectangle has to fit inside the circle. Oh no, sorry, the circle has to fit inside the rectangle. So now I was going to cut it then, but now I'm just going to drag it. Highlight both, and then I'll center it using the position align function. So we want to align them horizontally. That's it. And now I can weld them. So using the weld tab under modify, weld, and so I've just got one shape now rather than two. And I need to make a little circle in the middle on the top of the rounded bit. That's where you can hook your wreath onto a nail or something, a pin. And that needs to sit in the centre of that rounded area. So I'll highlight both shapes, use the align function, and I incorrectly chose align vertically. So I'm going to go back and align horizontally instead. So it's in the centre, and now I can make a compound path. So use a compound path to make a hole. So rather than it just being another circle sitting on top of the welded shape, it's actually a hole, and that's how we'll fit it onto our circle. So it's a little hanging tab. So I decided to make the rectangle a little bit thinner. It was a bit too big. So now I'm now sending the shape to the cutting machine. I've got my ring placed on the mat, and I'm just going to click cut and pan over to the Silhouette cutting machine, and you can see it cutting. Oh, just a little zoom to my inks. So it cuts really well and really quickly. Gives a very neat finish. So I've got my leaf on my mat, my 12 by 12 mat. I'm duplicating it, and now I'm going to space them across the mat by moving them across. There are different ways of doing this. So I've realised that the paper I'm going to cut, I'm using for cutting. So I've turned one of the sprigs upside down so that I can get more onto the mat, highlighting them both, and I'm going to duplicate that and move them across. Oops, that didn't work. Go back. Duplicate them and then pull them across. Add one more. I've actually take that away again because you'll see. Mirror, duplicate them by mirroring below, and then slide them across slightly and fit them in so we can get more onto the page. And you can keep duplicating them, mirroring them, and moving them across until you fill the sheet. So mirror below, highlight them, move them across. So the paper I'm using is actually 4x A4 size, so I realised I couldn't have as many in a row as I put there, so taking some off and I'll move some across. So my paper was actually a bit wider than A4, so I realised I could fit some more in. So I'm just sending it to the I've sent it to the cutting machine. And it's cutting away. I use a fabric blade on my silhouette because it's got a much stronger and sharper blade. I don't use it for cutting fabric at all, just always paper and cardstock. Little pan around the room. So now I'm going to duplicate my berries. Remove the leaves. Highlight the berries. Move them across. I don't need as many berries as I do leaves, so I don't need to duplicate them as much. So I'm just going to space them out using the align function and space horizontally, and I'll duplicate them, mirror them below, so I can have 2 lines of berries, and I should only need that many berries. And I'll send it to the cutting machine, and I'll cut them out of red cardstock. It's actually more paper weight than cardstock. So setting them to cut. So now I'm assembling my ring using some Scotch quick dry adhesive, and now I am attaching the leaves, just putting a little bit of glue on the end, on the stem, and positioning them so that they face slightly outwards towards the outer edge and the inner edge, and going all around the ring. I'll speed this up a bit now. So now everything's attached, all the leaves are attached, and I'm going to curl the leaves so they look a bit more 3D, a bit more dimensional, because they're quite flat at the moment. So I'm going to take a pencil with a round shaft, wood area, and just lift up a couple of leaves, and then gently, whilst holding onto the base, curl them around the pencil. And I'll go around and I'll do a few at a time all the way round. So now they're all dimensional and looks a lot better. I'm going to add my berries now. Just adding a little bit of glue to the stem, and then slotting them in between the leaves so that they face in the same direction as the leaves. A bit of glue on my leaf there, but it will dry clear, so it's okay. So I'm now going to make a score mark on my hanging tag by scoring just where the semicircle joins the rectangle, because we want to bend that bit in slightly, out slightly, so we can get a hook or a nail behind it when we attach it to the wreath. So just decide where you want to put it on the wreath, which bit you want to be at the top. It should all look pretty similar, but if you have if you prefer a certain way up, then place the hanging tag at the top. Just put some glue on the side. Bends that the circular bit bends away from, and then just glue it onto the ring. It's quite easy, and let it dry, and you can hang it up, and it's finished. Isn't that easy? It's really easy and quick. You have your own handmade paper wreath.